We're live.
We're live.
Good to be back this Monday to talk about rule number 5 from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
Correct.
Rule number 5: do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Um, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. What do you think about it?
I think it's tremendous.
Is Jordan Peterson correct?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have some standards that the kids can, I guess, attach to, because otherwise, they'll be amok. Run. In fact, this weekend we went to a place to have lunch, and it was a large restaurant, and so there was a lot of echo, and there were a couple little kids there screaming at the top of their lungs because they like how they echo, uh, you know, and everybody was turning around to see who was screaming so loud. And so it was a young couple, and they were laughing and having a good time with the kids, so they didn't necessarily stop that kind of behavior, you know,
Initially.
initially.
But then when I looked over, if it's the same kid we're talking about, the dad put his hand over to the kid's mouth. The
Right.
kid must have been like maybe what, 3?
Yeah.
Around there, 3 years old.
Well, there were two screaming, brother and sister.
Oh,
The
okay.
little guy must have been like two, and the little girl three, three and a half.
Yeah.
And I think the little guy started it, and since they thought it was funny, then the little girl, you know,
Tagged in.
tagged in. But then it became, a screaming match. And so maybe that's when you saw the father do that. Yeah.
Yeah, to the older one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept because one of the biggest takeaways that I get from this rule is to make your children uh kids that people want to socialize with, other children and other adults.
Right.
And that's what he's getting to. He says don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them, but he's also referring to when they go out in society, whether you're in a public place like these kids were, everybody's turning and kind of annoyed at the kids. You understand that they're kids,
Right, right.
but it gets to a certain point where it can become annoying. And I think that's what Jordan Peterson says. You're not going to make friends like that. And in life, adults aren't going to want to help you if you're like that. So teach your kids to be socially accepted as well.
Right.
It's an interesting, very interesting concept.
Oh, I wish I would have read this book a long time ago, you know?
Would you change, let's say, your parenting?
Of course. Yeah.
Really?
Well, uh, so first of all, we're interpreting this to the best of our ability, right? And this is our opinion.
Of course.
So what do we know? Okay? Not much. But the thing is that, we had three children and we raised them, right? And they seem to be doing pretty good, uh, as human beings goes. But um, yeah, I would have changed a lot of stuff because I was a dad that, um, you know, I gave the sandal to my kids. The famous chancla that you see. There's on the internet, there's a lady that she's so good throwing that chancla. She's of course Hispanic, okay? And they put like these little cups like 20 feet away, and they go, okay, try to knock this little pyramid of cups, and she goes whack, and she knocks them down. And she does it like three times in a row or something like that, so she's really good. She's mastered the art of
Yeah.
throwing the chancla at her kids. She had like six of them. I mean, she never failed. She hit them even when they were running away. She would hit them
Yeah.
dead on. Okay. So it's funny, but I use the chancla on my kids, you know,
Oh, yeah.
um, and maybe I wouldn't have, you know.
Well, actually, this rule says he talks about not necessarily the chancla, but he does say towards the ending of the chapter, he recommends if timeout doesn't work, then you take it to physical restraint if necessary, and then he uses different words, right? But he says then if that doesn't work, a swat across the backside if necessary. So
Yeah.
he's talking about a chancla if you need to, because with some kids, let's say, and this is, I don't have the experience you have obviously as a raising kids, you know, for nearly as long as you have. But timeout, he says, can work with some kids.
Right.
But if you think about it, would it have worked with you? Timeout?
Well, I come from an upbringing. So I was born in Cuba, and Cuba is a very hot climate. So the reason I say this is because when I was a kid, I always had shorts. I never had lengthy pants, right? Very seldom. I would go to the park and play in shorts. And so I would get in trouble all the time with my aunt. My aunt was the enforcer in the family, and she had a leather belt, and my legs were marked. I mean, I get whacked like once a week because I was doing something that they didn't like. And my mom never hit me. I think my dad hit me once in his life or twice. And, but my aunt would every
Did
week
she? But
nail
she
me.
did she live with you at the time in Cuba?
We would come to her house every day,
Oh, okay.
because she lived in a better neighborhood and their schools were better. And so I had registered in that school. So I would stay with my aunt and uncle and my mom. And it was a very close knit family. And so I would come to her house. It was an apartment in a very nice newer area, and the schools were good. And so I would go to school there. And so I was there most of the time. And in the weekends, I would be with my mom and dad at our house. But I would get in trouble. She would call down and, come up. And I would say, no, I want to play. And she would come down the stairs with a leather belt and she whacked me left and right with it.
Yeah.
I have bruises all over my legs, And that was on a weekly basis.
But you also, hear that growing up, like when you guys went to school, especially private or Catholic schools, the nuns and some of the, what is it called? Corporal punishment.
Yeah,
They would smack you with rulers and this.
well, I
People have horrible stories.
so in Cuba, I went to a public school and I got whacked there too. The teacher, it was brutal because I remember this teacher, her name was Mercedes, I'll never forget it. And it was during math class and I did something wrong and she said, "Come up, put your hands out," and you had to put your hands out. And she had this ruler and she would whack on the top of the,
The
not on,
knuckles.
yeah, on the knuckles. And she would hit me with that and I would go like this and take the hands away and that wasn't a good hit. So she said that doesn't count. And you got hit 3 times. So that was in Cuba. When I got here, I didn't know the language and stuff like that. I got myself in trouble and I got the paddle. So let me tell you,
So,
that was brutal.
but that's was part of your upbringing and
Yes.
the raising that you got. But you're saying that you would potentially raise your children differently, let's say after
After reading,
reading some
well,
this rule.
I didn't hit my kids with rulers and I didn't hit them with paddles or anything like that, but I did hit him with the sandal,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, but he's not saying that's a bad thing.
Well, right, but I did do that. And so, he's giving several tips. He says you could turn someone into stone by just a mere look. And I
Some
used to,
kids.
some kids, yeah. So, I used to, like give a real hard look to some of you. And I'm talking about my kids now, because now I have grandkids too. And I wouldn't dare do to my grandkids some of the stuff that I did to you guys. Okay?
Yeah. It's
Because
different. You're the grandfather.
I'm the grandfather.
They
I
have their
wouldn't dare
parents.
take a chancla to one of my grandkids.
They
You
have their
know,
parents to enforce,
right.
let's say.
So it's a different dynamic. Okay?
Yeah.
because you have somebody else that's been married into the family, and you never know how they're going to react.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it's still corporal punishment.
Yeah.
But he's saying, okay, you can turn someone to stone by just a very hard glare, or a verbal command, or a flick of the finger, in public.
Or
He's
like I always heard,
uh,
a
un
pinch,
pinch,
or a ear
a flick.
grab, all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff that
It's funny
it's
because
very common in Latin households.
let me tell you, I went to see George Lopez recently.
Try not to cover
Okay,
the
I'm
mic.
sorry. I went to see George Lopez recently,
Yeah.
and he was alluding to the fact of how children get raised today.
Oh,
And he was saying, in his days, and of course he's got a foul mouth and all this stuff, but he was saying, look, uh, I know we're in public now, but if you don't behave, wait till you get home.
yeah.
I'm going to give you the beating of your life that you're not going to be able to walk in a month. And so, and there's a lot of truth to that,
Yeah.
even
Well,
though he puts it in a joking manner.
yeah. Yeah, I think
Uh,
going back to the rule, if you allow what Jordan Peterson, what I got out of it is, if you allow your kids to do things constantly that you begin to dislike them, let's say they behave inappropriately in a public setting or something, you don't correct it. Then this was really powerful. You end up going home and your kid has moved on. They do a little piece of art, or they've accomplished something, and they come to you to show you their achievement, and they're very proud of their achievement. They show it to you, and because of what they did earlier, you don't react to it. You're not you don't positively reinforce that behavior. You don't really maybe even pay attention to it, or kind of get out of here. What he's saying is that even the best people, the best hearted people, will begin to do this because they hold what the kid did earlier.
right.
And so that is more damaging to the kid than anything, than maybe correcting their behavior. And you're going to fight them on it initially, and it's hard, but this is more damaging, ignoring your child when they've done something special that they want to show you, an
You mean
achievement,
something good?
something good.
No, no,
That
you're
does
supposed
more
to.
damage.
That's right.
But that anyone this can happen to anyone, because you're holding still to what they did earlier in the day,
Right.
misbehaving.
That's not good at all. See,
No.
that's why I know that we're being watched in public, but the way I do it is immediate. If you do something wrong, and again, what do I know? Okay. But if you do something wrong in the restaurant or whatever, immediately I'm going to address it. Okay. If you're spilling the water, I'm taking it away and I'm giving you a napkin and you have to clean it. Of course, it depends on the age of the child, but that's how I do it with my grandkids. Hey, you have to be careful. And I make sure that I lead by example. When I leave that table, I clean it and I make sure that I put the chairs back in and I show it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, but if you do something bad, whether it's in public or not, I don't care who's watching. I'm addressing it with him or her. But this is the way I handle now my grandkids. Okay. But I think I did that with you guys too, you know. Although we got a lot of he mentions it in the law. Some people say, "Oh, how
The
well
rule.
behaved your kids are." I always got that. Yeah, your kids are well behaved, this and that and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain norm to follow in society. One thing that I mean, this law made me
Rule. It's a
rethink.
rule.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. This rule from Jordan Peterson made me rethink everything, Mike.
Really?
Yeah, because for example, our perception is that the kid understands us. They don't. And especially if they're 2 year old, 3 year old, because he says, look, the word no only means no from one civilized person to another. So the word no means no only from one civilized person to another. The kid's not civilized. He's a little monster. He calls them little monsters.
It's interesting that
Yeah.
yeah, because you've always said a little child is an angel.
It,
In this rule, he's saying that they're born basically little monsters. They're extremely violent. One of the most violent people are 2-year-olds.
yeah.
They'll kick and scream and this and that
And bite.
and bite. You know, what I thought was very interesting was, well, he says peace is a mystery, violence is innate in kids. So we should be, instead of being like, why is he attacking you? Why is he hitting his mom? Why is he this? That's they're born with that, and that we have to teach them not to do that. That violence is just in them. I mean, I see it with little kids. You know, they'll just hit for no reason.
Right.
It's not like they're necessarily trying to hurt somebody or anything. They just, it's in them.
Well, he gives the example in the playroom of the little monster that comes up to his daughter and steps on her hand and continues to press and press with the shoe.
Yeah.
And he says, I got him and I threw him 15 feet across or 30 feet across the yard. And then he says, no, I didn't do that. I really didn't do that. He felt like doing that. I'm sure he did. He didn't say that in the book, but I'm sure he felt like getting that little bullying because he was 4 years old and his daughter was two. So he's actually bullying the daughter and stepping on her hand. So I'm sure he felt like grabbing the little kid and throwing him 30 feet across. He didn't do it. What he did was he took his daughter to another place, another safer place. Then he says, but if I would have thrown him 30 feet across, I would have done him a favor. Think about that for a second.
It's not his place.
No, it's not his place. But he says, if I had done it, I would have done the kid a favor. Why?
Well,
Because he's showing him that that kind of behavior is not acceptable behavior in our society. You can't hurt someone that's a little
mhm.
younger than you or whatever, but there's that bullying instinct or whatever.
Well, yes. And he says if you don't do the hard task of addressing this behavior as a kid, society will do a much harder version of addressing it.
Correct, like
What,
jail.
like jail, or potentially you get shot or whatever the case, because you never, because now you're in the world. So, as a parent, you should be responsible to do these things. It's interesting. You know, um, what do you think about parent versus friend? He brought up that topic of being a parent versus a friend.
You know, I I'm more and more of the belief now that I'm older that a a father and a mother should be a parent. They should not be a friend. I'm more of the belief as I was raising you guys, I wanted to be your father and your friend. I wanted you guys to think that I was the cool dad and you would come with me with issues and I try that. But now I think that the friendship baloney can go out the window. I want to be your father. I want to be respected. And I want you to know that I come with these standards and this is what it is.
Mm,
And he mentioned that the reason we're in so much trouble today with regards to raising children is that parents fear the fact that their child may not love them because of the discipline that they may provide.
mhm.
And so, if we take that fear that your child won't love you and throw it out the window and just make sure that you're raising someone that will be a productive member of society, you owe it to society, you owe it to yourself. First and foremost, you owe it to the kid.
Yeah,
Be a father. Forget about being a friend. This is my opinion, folks. This is my idea,
of course.
and I'm changing it. And this book is really making me rethink a lot of things.
From my perspective, I also as a kid, I mean, I'm 34 now, right? But as a kid, I think that now looking back, I also agree with you that the parents are there to be parents more than anything, just from my perspective again. And then, later on in life, can you also develop some sort of friendship with your kids? I think so later on in life, but I think you're still always going to be the parent, you know?
Yeah,
It's going to be different. There are some people that have, like, for example, Peterson brought up single moms that have to be the everything to the kid,
yeah,
and so
it's tough.
these are challenges, these are real life situations. Not everybody has a two-parent household where both parents are present, but if you do, and both parents are present, and they're, have discipline in your life and everything, like, that's, consider yourself blessed, because not everybody's born into that situation.
Yeah. And there's a lot of theories out there. Preparing for this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
we, of course, we do a lot of research and we do our research independently. So when we come to the podcast, you have your research you're done and your ideas, and I have mine. And, I'm doing my research and stuff. And so, I guess the algorithms or whatever feeds you stuff that you're looking at and reading and so forth. And I got this thing about this very famous lady psychologist, clinical psychologist. And she said something that was interesting. I'll throw it in here. She says, look, after the age of 10, from the age of 10 and above, the father of the household becomes the most important figure for that child, whether it is a girl or a boy.
Hmm.
And then she gave explanations supposedly on why.
Who's this?
It's a very famous psychologist, a lady,
Mm.
she's in her early 40s, very famous. And she said something like that. And the reason she was saying that is because the strength of the father is necessary to provide the discipline not to break community laws or whatever.
Mm.
And she was saying, look, one becomes more dominant than the other. And you don't have that in it. Reminded me because you're talking about single moms,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and at some point they have to be as strong as, let's say, a father, because they say, the strong father figure kind of thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
the loving mother figure, right? And so they have to be both,
Yeah. Or even a single father.
or even a single father. That's right.
Um,
But I know that I have the blessing of being able to babysit my grandkids. And I know that I'm not raising them, but whatever little I'm doing to help in their raising, it's way different than when I raised you guys. Way different.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, as a grandparent,
As a grandfather, yeah.
yeah, it's very different.
To
Which
me,
is something that Peterson doesn't talk about in this rule. He's talking about the parents
right.
disciplining the kids. But what do you think about where they say, "Oh, it takes a village,"
It does.
and like it's more of a community thing? You have a lot of involvement from grandparents on both sides to uncles and aunts and different family that potentially
It
can,
takes a village.
yeah,
And the kid is a little sponge that's absorbing everything. And by the way, you mentioned that I say that every little child is an angel.
yeah.
They are. They are. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde put together in one, because they are noble in their nature. They're little angels, they're little flowers that need to be molded, and they're beautiful and soft and beautiful. They have good thoughts. However, they also can be a little monster, and it depends, you know, what you nurture. Like, for example, with my grandkids, what I'm trying to do is instill in them our values and our culture, whether it's through music, the music that my parents used to hear. Like today we had on Juan Legido, okay? Who listens to Juan Legido? Nobody. Um, the the food that we eat, the music, the food, the mannerisms, uh, our traditions. I'm trying to instill some of that in them. And when they leave out the front door, then they get exposed to something totally different.
Hmm.
Okay. But at least here, and they know it, once you're here, because there's been occasions when I'm telling one of my grandkids, hey, don't do that. And now they speak, right? The ones that speak, they say, oh, well, I, I can do that, at this other house. And I said, okay, well, if you can do that at that house, okay. But here, you're
These
not
are the
able,
rules.
these, here, you can't do that. I don't want you doing that here. So you know that the minute you walk into grandpa's house here,
Hmm.
I don't want you doing that. And if you do that, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to give you a timeout or whatever the case may be.
That's he also says that clear rules, proper discipline will help the kid. And he talked about these principles, limit the rules, and the second principle is discipline children with the minimum necessary force.
Right.
It's interesting because yeah, growing up, yeah, there were rules. The respect you had to respect mom. That was one of the things very clear in the household. Like, and you would bring up like, hey, if you leave that thing on the floor and you just walk right by it, well, guess what? Your mom's now gonna have to bend over and pick that up. So pick it up. It was the idea that like don't put your mom in that situation.
And by the way, that just happened last week
Oh yeah.
with one of my grandkids. You know, one of, there was something on the floor that, was there, and it doesn't belong there. It should be picked up and put somewhere else. And it's evident and they know it. And I said, hey, pick that up and put it over there. And he goes, I didn't put it there. Somebody else put it there. And I said, I don't care. I don't care.
Clean it up.
Clean it up. He goes, but I didn't do that. And I go, I don't care. Clean it up. And I got some resistance there, but I made him do it. Put it over there. It's, somebody else is going to have to do
What do you think about well, there were a couple things
I
I
tell
thought
you.
this was an interesting quote from the book. Pain is more potent than pleasure and anxiety more than hope.
It's crazy.
Pain is more potent than pleasure. So he was talking about like reward versus the opposite. So like in some situations reward works. Hey, you did a good job. You're a good boy or whatever. You're a good girl. You did something bad, punishment. That's what he was explaining. Discipline. Teach your children to be fun to play with.
Can I say something about
Yeah,
that real
yeah,
quick?
yeah,
So when they do something good, I make sure to say, hey, you're a good boy. You're a good girl.
yeah.
When they do
In
something
your own
bad,
words.
yeah, eh, mostly in Spanish. When they do something bad, I never say you're a bad boy or a bad girl. I never say that.
No, but you might say like, "Hey, don't do that. You
Right,
don't hit your cousin.
right.
Don't whatever."
Yes, and I will, and I do. Don't do that, please.
Yeah.
That's not right. But I never
Or
say
say you're sorry. So you're
say you're sorry.
you're enforcing some sort of discipline, let's
Right.
say.
And I never say you're a bad person.
Right.
Never. But I do say you're a good person.
Right. Right. Yeah.
The other thing that I do, which I've made a couple of comments to people, and they thought, oh, that's interesting, because we're always talking about people know that we babysit our grandkids. Okay. So one of the things that I do is that when I put one of my grandkids on timeout, okay, and timeout is short, right? So, but they don't want to be in timeout,
Hmm.
especially the little ones, and
Hmm.
they get up from the chair or whatever, because I usually sit them somewhere. You're in
Hmm.
timeout, you can't do nothing, and they get up like seconds later, and they say that I'm out, timeout's over. So I tell them no, get back and sit back and stay in timeout so that I don't let them make the decision of how long the timeout should be or let them have the power to break the timeout. I'm the one that has the power. So you're going to sit back down And so I make it a point because it always happens. I put them on timeout and they jump up like, you know, 15 seconds later.
They're ending their own
They're
timeout.
That's it. They're ending their own timeout. And I tell them, no, you don't have the power to do that. Go sit back down and continue in timeout. And that works pretty good, I think.
So
It's a mind game. It's
I
a
don't, again, I don't
it,
have the experience, so I don't, on some of that stuff I can't comment other than my own as a kid going through it, right? Because yeah, I don't have that experience that you have, and now you're doing it with your grandkids, certain levels of rules and things. But what I thought was really cool with he says that the brain reacts neurologically similar to physical trauma as it does to isolation.
wow,
So
that's right.
timeout, when he was saying like when you put a kid in timeout, or if you're in isolation, let's say in prison, right? Um, he's saying that neurologically it's a similar reaction to physical trauma.
Wow.
So timeout is effective, is what he's saying.
Well, it's
It can be effective.
it. I'm sure that it is, but it's brutal on the parent. For example, as a grandparent, when I put one on timeout, let's say she's sitting there and she's crying her eyes out. But if I take her off a timeout because she's crying, then now I'm feeding that positive reinforcement. Oh, if I cry when I'm on timeout, I can get up.
Hmm.
So it's takes every ounce of it. It's brutal. I if after their timeouts, it's like if I ran a 5 mile course because it's brutal on me, right? So, but she's crying her eyes out, but I don't put her in timeout, like 20 feet away. I put her timeout in a little chair right where we are, right? So then the other one is playing with the blocks and whatever. And this one is seeing that the other one is playing, but she can't play. It makes the timeout more effective, but she cries or he cries or whatever, whoever was that on timeout.
Yeah.
And it's
So it's hard
tough.
for the one enforcing that.
Oh, it's tough.
And you have to, but you do it because you know that in the long run,
Yeah.
they'll be better off.
And let me tell you, when the timeout is over, oof, I'm so happy and glad because I'm the one that's suffering. She suffer, whoever it was, he, she, whatever, they're on timeout. They're suffering too.
Yeah.
But if they're bawling their eyes out because they're crying, it's tough to continue with that. It's tough.
Yeah.
So I can see how parents will cave in, you
Yeah.
know? I don't because I know that in the long run, but let me tell you, when the timeout is over, I'm a happy camper. I go, whew, it's like if I had been in timeout, you know? But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, parenting is tough. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that this, again, for me, one of the biggest takeaways was about allowing your kids to like be social. Um, this is actually a quote from the book. He says, "It is the primary duty of parents to make their children socially desirable." I think about it in life. There was this gentleman in this was in a business setting that was very sociable, and they were very, I guess you could say, well connected. A lot of people liked this person and thought very good of this person. And in business, some people are just focused and kind of independent, and they isolate themselves, and they're very, let's say, in sales, top producers, but they don't really socialize with other people. They're just to themselves, top producer. But this gentleman was not like that. They were very social. And I remember it was I was thinking like, why are they doing that, this and that? And they would tell me, well, because by being, let's say, in good graces and socially desirable, as Peterson puts it, with these people, they send me business. And when this person in management retires, they retire with me. They do their business with me. And when this person in corporate has a relative that's got a lot of money to invest or whatever, they come to me. So I agree with what he's saying about the importance of being socially desirable, because even in a business setting,
Of
the
course.
importance of like networking and having good
Oh,
relationships with people in the long run, you end up it ends up working out a lot better for you than if you're kind of isolated into yourself.
oh,
But it doesn't come to everybody. Some people don't like that type of being, okay with everybody, and because it takes work for some people.
yeah. Well, we're in the business of sales.
Yeah.
Okay.
But some people in sales are not that social.
Tell me about it. I mean, I make phone calls and people don't even return the calls. How are you servicing that person?
Yeah.
You talk about isolation. And then you talk to people. I've made phone calls and we're in real estate. So I've made phone call and I say, "Hi, my name is so and so. I'm calling on this property. Yes, how can I help you?" Just like that, right off the bat. I never would do that, man. I would say, "Oh, yes, that particular property. What would you like to know about it?" You know,
It's a different approach. Yeah.
for sure. Now, listen, whatever, I'm not here to knock anybody, because but I think that having rapport with the person, having a dialogue,
Yeah.
it's the whole it's the whole thing, really. You never know what can come up when you're asking the so-called open-ended questions and you get a reply.
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, being socially acceptable, are you kidding me? Of course. And I think it starts from the beginning. In fact,
Yeah.
I know that Jordan Peterson has said this before. Now, I did so much research on this thing. I don't know if he said it specifically in this law. I know you just concentrate on the
In
law,
the rule.
in the rule, but I think that somewhere along the line he says if your child reaches the age of 4,
Yeah, it's here.
that's here. He's done. She's done. The blueprint is installed. You better get these guys before they reach the age of 4
Yeah.
and reach them with your core values and whatever it is that you're trying to say. Because by the time they get to 4, the blueprint is laid out. That kid is done,
That's he brings
according
up
to him.
yeah, he brings up like studies, and I think that's good. Um maybe people have a different experience, and kids are very different also, so maybe some kids is not exactly for, but yeah, he did bring up have peers are the primary source of socialization after the age of 4. So if you have a kid that's doesn't is not desirable socially, and he's a bully, or he's mean with other kids, or he doesn't know how to socialize with other kids, they're not going to want to play with him. He's not going to get picked. They're not going to want to be friends with him, and that really affects that kid. They're isolated, they're by themselves, because especially as kids, and I think it continues even as adults, we just want to be desired, wanted. We want people to want to play with us. We want people to want to hang out with us. If we're not invited to something, it hurts. I didn't get invited to that. So yeah, that's what he was talking about the age of 4.
Well, we're watching something on TV right now where the kid, I think this kid is older. He must be like 6 or 7. But imagine you have a little birthday party. You're 4 years old. You invite your class, but for X or Y reason, what they think of you, how you've behaved in the past, nobody brings their kids to the birthday party. And the birthday party for that little kid is just filled with 1 or 2 or 3 adults. All the kids in his class that he invited, the parents decided not to attend it, not to take the kid for X or Y reason. Okay?
So it's a birthday party. They invite a bunch of kids, and very few kids go. Is that what you're saying?
Nobody goes.
Oh, nobody goes to the party. Got it.
Nobody goes to the party. So he's there with his little cake. That kind of stuff is traumatic.
Yeah.
Okay? And
Oh,
that happens.
well, I think that goes hand in hand with
That
this.
happens. It happens because of religious reasons.
Yeah.
It happens because of work environment. It happens because of idiosyncrasies that we have in this world with other people.
Hmm.
And that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
I'm
That
sure.
happens. Now, let
Definitely.
me give you another example that I uh, felt in my own skin. You get invited to a party and you attend it, and there's a quite a few people there, 40, 50 people, but they're in little groups,
Hmm.
like cliques, okay? And you're there and nobody makes an effort to come and say hello or whatever, and you're all alone and everybody's having a good old time, okay? This happened to my wife and I a long time ago, a long time ago.
You
Eh,
are already adults.
yes, and it was extremely unpleasant, and we left very quickly because we didn't feel wanted. Everybody was, and then they're looking at you, and nobody makes an effort to say hello or whatever. The host comes by every now and then, but we felt completely alienated, and it's a horrible feeling. I'm here to tell you, I, I lived it, and
Yeah.
we got the heck out of there because they don't need us, but we don't need them. And this was like 40 years ago, and it still left an impression. This is like 40 years ago, man.
And
Okay?
that's as an adult.
That's as an adult.
Can you imagine as a kid?
That's right.
So that's got to leave a big,
A
big,
lasting imprint it did
yeah,
on us,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. That's not,
Your mother
eh,
felt very uncomfortable. And
it's
that's
not
because,
enjoyable.
yeah, not enjoyable at all.
Yeah.
And I did too. And we got the heck out of there. So, there's something to be said about, there's some guy on Instagram that says, hey, you know what? I
Don't block
don't
the mic.
I don't go to places where I'm not invited.
Mm.
I don't go to
Oh yeah.
places where I'm not valued,
Hmm.
or if they, if there's three lines that he says that are very powerful, but essentially is, you know, he does where if he doesn't feel a connection,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
he just doesn't go to those places to do what? To suffer? And imagine on a child. Now, we as adults can take action
We
towards
can
it.
reason,
Right.
understand that.
What about a child?
Yeah.
You know?
That's
But
hard.
if you don't curve a behavior
Yeah.
that you think is not productive, eventually that child is going to push that envelope so far off the table, you know? Um, you owe it to your child to try to get him or her into some kind of confines that is socially acceptable, so then the rest of the world can come in and help nurture that growth, because like you just said, it takes a village.
Yeah.
you know it's not just the influence of the grandparents or the parents, although that is immense, right? But you got school, you got friends, you've got workplace, you've got
Organizations, church,
organizations,
whatever.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you owe it to the kid, man.
And you're not limiting creativity according to Peterson, because one thought is that, oh, I don't want to put all this structure
Right.
and rules because I'll limit the kid's creativity. What
Correct.
what he brings up studies is that um, you're actually doing the opposite.
Right.
So it's interesting. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted
Well,
to
I'll
throw
say
in.
something that's controversial, but you know a lot of people think, and I am more and more part of that group, especially lately as I get older, that school tends to stifle creativity.
Hmm.
I don't care what school you're in. I don't care what school you're in. You know, when you have a dogma or all these standards that are being rammed into, you know, and there is a study out there, you guys look it up, where they studied children that were like 2 year olds or something like that, and their quotient for
Their
genius was
IQ.
super high,
Oh yeah, yeah, like what they were trending or something.
super high, trending. And then they come back a year later after they were in school for a year, and that quotient was decreased. And then they come back another year and that quotient was even lower. So what is school doing to our kids? I don't, this is extremely controversial, but I happen to think that, um, you know, schools don't provide the creativity that
Hmm.
kids need to develop their genius quotient or whatever.
Yeah. That
Um,
that's not in
so
the rule,
that's not in the
but
rule.
it is
So
something interesting you bring up, and I wouldn't blanket and say all schools because I don't know. Maybe there are some schools
I don't know.
that do encourage creativity. But I hear what you're saying, and it's interesting. But I think the household, if you can control the household and what, and that's what Peterson's getting to. Even with the previous rules, it's about personal. Uh, what's the word?
Rules?
Personal.
You're talking about rules now?
Yeah, with the rules, it's about the personal. Like not responsibility, but actually, I think that is, I think the word, like about taking your own responsibility for yourselves. With rule one, you're gonna stand up straight with your shoulders back.
Yeah.
With rule two, you're gonna uh,
Make friends with people who want to the best for you?
that's three. Um,
Sorry.
but with rule two, you're going to take care of
Treat yourself like someone
yours.
you're responsible for helping.
Correct. So be good to yourself. Three is choose friends that want the best for you. Four is bless you, bless you.
Compare yourself to someone to someone who you were yesterday,
Not to who.
not to who someone is today.
Yeah. So see, all these things are about improving
Yeah,
yourself, and now this one is um your kids, the
right.
future.
So I'll just say one last thing because this thing's gone long, but I think that the most important thing that we can give our children is our time and our love and understanding in our time. And I think that we need to be strong as parents.
Hmm.
And I may be wrong in this, so don't crucify me for this, but I don't think that we should be friends with the kids. I think that we should be parents
Yeah.
and demand respect and do the best job we've got with what we've, you know,
Yeah.
who knows? And
Oh,
there are no guarantees no matter what. Do the best you can with what you got. Give them time and your love and understanding. You give them time. Give your time to the child.
y-
Spend time with the child.
yeah.
Don't
Just
let somebody else raise the child. Don't think that school is going to do the job.
right.
Be a
Yeah.
father and be a mother.
Yeah. I think rules are good. Discipline is good.
There
All
you
right.
go.
Cool.
What do we know?
Thank you.